Good afternoon, everyone. Another round of applause for the CMS crew. They've done an awesome job. So I'm John. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Culture Decadence. We are a Wisconsin-based cellular agriculture company dedicated to developing cell-cultured lobster. I also want to thank Alex, Anita, Yuri, and the rest of the CMS team. Like he mentioned, I was here at the first CMS 4 years ago, so four-time attendee, first-time speaker. I'm really excited to come full circle today. But let's get into it. So this afternoon, we'll talk briefly about my team, our reference point for this topic. We'll discuss sustainability, what it means for the seafood industry, specifically lobsters. And then finally, we'll look at solutions, both current and ones offered by Cell Ag. And then we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So Culture Decadence's mission is to create cell-cultured seafood that is nutritious, animal-friendly, and sustainable, and provides an authentic experience for consumers worldwide. We're based in Pattison, Wisconsin, currently known for cheese, but in the near future, and in all seriousness, we plan to make it the seafood capital of the world. You can laugh a little bit for now, but it'll happen. We also raised $2.1 million earlier this year, including grants from the state of Wisconsin, and we have a team of 9 people that are currently working on this problem. This is the team behind the tech. We're joined in this mission by a group of cell engineers, cell bio, genetics, marine biology, tissue engineering, and food science. A bit more about me. I worked in finance and consulting out of college, including a stint in China. And then I came back and served in the military for 4 years as an active duty tank officer. I then went to business school, thinking I wanted to be Gordon Gekko and make a bunch of money on Wall Street. But I had a strange encounter as I was going to class one day. I took some free food from a food truck, walked down the street, ate it, realized this isn't beef. It was a hamburger, or what I thought it was, and went back and asked him what it was, and it turned out to be a Beyond Meat burger. And this was back in 2017, way before the IPO, and I wasn't vegan, I wasn't vegetarian, but it just got me thinking about what are the biggest problems that we have to solve as a planet, and how can I use my skills to do that? And it got me on this path of cell-cultured meat, got me connected with New Harvest, and ultimately dedicating my life to this endeavor. Since that, we've started a company in Pattison, and we're going to explain a little bit more about seafood, lobsters, and how that plays into sustainability. So when we think about sustainability, we think that a great starting point is understanding what the end state is that we're striving for. And for us, I think it's beautifully summed up in the 1987 definition from a UN publication called The Common Future, which termed it as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. For some companies in the cell ag industry, the UN Sustainable Development Goals have provided a great reference point and are ones that we think about internally at Culture Decadence. They also need to be equated to specific, actionable, and measurable outcomes. And in terms of the food system we're building, this means creating a solution that has 3 different characteristics. 1, the technology needs to be renewable and doesn't continuously deplete valuable resources. 2nd, we want to have a low impact, both on the environment and on animals. And 3rd, we need to create products that are desirable and give phenomenal consumer experiences, meaning great taste, nutritious, safe, and easy to use. What I want to do today is give you even more insight into a specific subsector of the seafood industry, and that's the lobster market, and discussing sustainability in that context. Much of the sustainability efforts, Much of the sustainability efforts in the current lobster industry are focused on limiting consumption by limiting lobster harvesting through a series of regulations that typically relates to when and how they can be harvested, as well as the size, the gender, and the equipment that are used. But this solution doesn't really provide something that's long-term. It limits producers' abilities to make a living, and reduces access and drives up prices for these delicious products for consumers around the world. Getting back to our definition of sustainability, it certainly doesn't meet the needs for the current generation without sacrificing the future. Now, it's important that we dive deeper into the problems that the lobster supply chain faces to understand why the current sustainability solution really isn't that sustainable. To set the stage for that, this industry and the lobster fisheries, in particular in the United States, are some of the most valuable fisheries in the world, and they are a key contributor to the $100 billion seafood market. However, unlike shrimp, oysters, and fish, much of which can be farmed and aquacultured, lobster is completely dependent on wild-caught product. And there are three main problems with the current lobster supply chain. One, they can't be farmed, and government regulations limit the supply. Two, the animals themselves take a long time to mature and yield a low amount of meat. And you're trying to hit a very high price point. So even just lobster meat by itself at retail is often $100 a pound. Way more expensive than really any other type of mainstream protein. And then finally, complex logistics add unnecessary costs and uncertainty and variability to the consumer experience. So as our team looked for solutions to these issues, we really needed to dive into those problems and understand the animals themselves. And in order to develop a sustainable solution, we've had to fit it to our criteria of success that's going to have an impact on the animal, the environment, and the consumer. So starting with the animal, let's look at their life cycle. A 1-pound lobster, which is the typical weight of the smallest harvestable commercially available animal, permitted by law, is 8 years to get to that size. That's way more than any of these other types of proteins. And on top of that, you're only yielding about 25% protein. So super inefficient method of producing a really awesome product, unfortunately. And unlike a lot of other types of seafood, there haven't been successful ways to domesticate these animals using aquaculture or farming techniques. And people have tried. We've talked to these people. We were referencing texts from 100 years ago as we're doing our research. It really is a difficult problem, and nobody's been able to master it. So the second motivator for us is almost more pressing, and that's the environmental implications of what we're doing. Lobster fisheries are often the victims of climate change. Here in North America, the Gulf of Maine, which extends up into Canada, and is where we get about 50% of the lobster catch globally, is unfortunately one of the fastest warming bodies of water on the planet, even though it represents less than 0.1% of the total oceans. These increases in ocean temperatures can lead to significantly lower rates of lobsters in the wild, and this is exactly what's happened in New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and parts of Massachusetts over the last 20 to 30 years. They've seen significant decrease in the populations and landings of these animals, and this is projected to happen in the Gulf of Maine as well. So, all of this considered, we need an answer to these core problems. And clearly, a reduction in consumption isn't a sustainable course of action that will meet the outcome of the demands for consumers and what the planet needs. So the answer in this case is not Allen Iverson. I hope that lands with some people. Okay, there we go. But it's cellular agriculture. This technology will allow us to grow the meat right from the animal cells, reducing the process only capable of happening currently in oceans over the course of 8 years to something that could really happen anywhere around the world and do it in a period of hopefully 8 weeks. And most importantly, this is without having to limit consumption or be subject to environmental volatility that the current industry faces. And by making it right from the cells, we're able to realize huge benefits. We can lower the impact on producers, consumers, and limit the exposure to environmental risk. And we'll do all this while increasing the supply, access, and value proposition of these products, something that current products on the market can't do, whether it's plant-based imitation, which is actually made from fish, and then conventional lobster. So we're able to improve this product and that experience for all aspects of the supply chain using this technology. We've seen this pathway before in terms of other technologies. And this is how we think about going from benchtop to tabletop. We've seen it in the transportation industry. So for now, or in the past, we were using horses to get around, and we were using lobsters to eat them. For centuries, we relied on that type of animal for transportation. But in the future, we'll be able to go to the combustion engine, where we're at right now with Surimi or the imitation. And then ultimately, we'll go to the electric car version of this. And for us, that's cell-cultured lobster. So in the future, sustainability in the crustacean space will mean actually no shells and more cells. My co-founder will appreciate that. That was his birth. But thank you for listening. I appreciate the time and look forward to your questions and talking more about lobsters. Yeah, I think for this space in particular, you know, crustaceans are a little bit more difficult in some aspects, especially around cell line development in media, because there isn't a tremendous amount of basic research that was done. Like I mentioned before, we reference texts from 90 years ago. You know, we'll try to look and talk to these people that are experts in this field, and unfortunately, sometimes they're dead. So we have to do a lot of that ourselves, but we've made a lot of great progress. So I think in the near term, it's some of the things that are easier for other cell culture meat companies around cell lines and media. Longer term, downstream, form factor, price point, I think we have a much easier path to market.
Hi, I would love if you could share a little bit more about your end product and how you envision consumers eating it, what kind of meals they'll be able to enjoy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the current lobster market has a wide range of prices. You know, on the low end, you're talking about a slurry. They call it mince, but that's a very generous word for what it is. And that's maybe $5 or $6 a pound wholesale. On the high end, lobster tails, just the meat, we're only talking meat here, maybe $30 to $40 a pound wholesale. You know, double that for retail, maybe even triple that for a restaurant. So in the near term, I think that we can really address the need for all segments of that market. Obviously, we'd like to hit that high price point as quickly and as soon as possible. We've had some really great advances on our tissue engineering capabilities and our scaffolding capabilities. And it looks, I was at a major seafood producer earlier this week in Seattle, and I showed them what we had, and the comment was, yep, that looks real. So I think that we can hit that high price point, and that could be a standalone product. Unfortunately, lobster isn't really consumed, at least here in the United States, in like, you don't buy a can of lobster typically and put it into things. I think we can change that. I think we can make it more accessible. So I would say, you know, first set of products are going to be something that incorporates it into a bisque, a soup, a ravioli, a lobster roll, while at the same time striving for those larger chunks of meat that can kind of take the centerpiece of the plate.
Great talk, John. It was really interesting. It blows me away that stat about 8 years to reach full size. So to me, that kind of seems to suggest like maybe there's a difference in the physiology of the cells. And does that translate to some extra challenges for you guys growing the cells? Do they behave differently? Is there a slower rate of proliferation? And if so, are there ways that you guys are exploring to engineer them to proliferate faster?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, these are very different animals, and things that you would think work even pulling from fish cell culture don't necessarily translate immediately. We've done a lot of iteration on that over the last 18 months, and that's paid off. You know, I think temperature is certainly one. They prefer a lower temperature. And that does, as you hit on, you know, their times to double are a bit longer. But again, even if our doubling times are 96 hours or, you know, 72 hours versus 18 or 24, it's still a lot shorter than 8 years. And, you know, I think there's ways to design your production process so that you do have kind of a continuous batch going and you can meet demand from that standpoint. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
but
sure. Thanks.
We could spend like 2 days on that alone.
Hi, John. My name is Irfan Tahir. Great talk. So we're here in San Francisco, but if I'm not wrong, your company is based in Madison, Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
So can you speak a little bit about the perception of cultured meat in the Midwest? Because it is a very sort of like different atmosphere than San Francisco.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the important thing to realize about the Midwest is it's not this, you know, homogeneous population of thoughts or ideas or beliefs. We're in Madison, and that's a very progressive part of the state. You know, if you look on any of those election maps, Madison will be blue and everything else will be red. Maybe Milwaukee, probably too. So we've seen a lot of, like the state, they gave us some small grants, so they're obviously very supportive of technology and biotech and frontier tech. I think that, you know, the Burger Kings that we go to, they also have Impossible Burgers. You know, there all the different alternative proteins are at the Target and the Walmart that we shop at. All the restaurants serve, you know, Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat Burger. So it's kind of like being an SF, but just there's a little bit more space and it's slightly cheaper in every aspect of life. But yeah, no, it's a great ecosystem. I would highly recommend. Some of you have already pitched moving your companies to Madison, but yeah, it really is an innovative space and place, and there's a lot of local infrastructure to support that. Show of hands, how many people got the Allen Iverson reference? Okay, good. That's solid. No, so yeah, to clarify that, eventually I think we can be a retail brand. You know, certainly I think that there's market share to be taken probably from other types of seafood and even other types of animal proteins, especially if we make it more accessible. And accessibility, especially in crustaceans, part of it's price, part of it's education on like how you can use it, but also just like the ease of use. So a lot of people won't use lobster because they think it's difficult to cook and you have to de-shell it. But if we can remove all of that, then we think that's a pretty significant barrier to take down. Anything else? I'll be on another panel, so you can hit me then too. So great. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it.